November 4th, 2023, a man approached his front door in Los Angeles when suddenly masked intruders attacked. The man's reaction left the intruders shocked and running for their lives. Here are 10 times gangs messed with the wrong citizens. January 5th, 2017, Dinuba, California. The Texaco gas station on El Monte Way was about to become the scene of a violent showdown that would change 2 lives forever and send shockwaves through the local community. Samuel Camposeco, age 29, and his gang associate Luis Vargas didn't start as criminal masterminds. Both men had records. Camposeco had a prior strike for attempted residential burglary in 2016. But on this winter night, they armed themselves with semi-automatic weapons and entered the Texaco store with a single goal: quick cash for their street gang. The plan was simple: in and out, fast. But what they didn't know, what would seal their fate, was that an off-duty police officer was already inside, sipping coffee and observing their every move. The officer, sensing something wrong, quietly slipped out and called for backup. As the silent alarm went off, a Dinuba police officer happened to begin his shift nearby. He arrived just as the situation inside escalated violently. Through the windows, he saw Vargas pistol whipping the store clerk, while Camposeco kept his gun trained on the victim. What happened next was fast and explosive. The officer drew his weapon, opened the door, and shouted, "Dinuba Police Department," firing a warning shot to stop the assault. That's when Camposeco and Vargas turned their guns on him, unleashing a barrage of bullets that narrowly missed the officer as he dove for cover behind his patrol car. But the officer wasn't about to let them escape. As the 2 men grabbed money and fled, Vargas made a fatal mistake, running directly toward the officer's position, gun blazing. Despite repeated orders to drop his weapon, Vargas kept firing. The officer, forced to defend himself, returned fire, striking Vargas multiple times. The confrontation ended as Vargas collapsed, mortally wounded. Camposeco took a different path, disappearing into the night. For a month, he evaded capture, hiding out in nearby Exeter. But the law caught up with him, ending his run and bringing him to face justice. The trial was swift and decisive. On May 29, 2025, a Tulare County jury found Camposeco guilty of attempted murder of a peace officer, conspiracy to commit robbery, assault with a semi-automatic firearm, and committing crimes for the benefit of a criminal street gang. The special allegation, discharging a firearm during a violent felony, sealed his fate. On July 1st, 2025, the court handed down the maximum sentence, 50 years to life in prison. Camposeco's criminal career and his freedom ended that day. And this wasn't just another failed robbery. It was a reminder that even the most careful criminals can't predict every variable. The presence of an alert off-duty officer turned a simple convenience store heist into a deadly confrontation, and ultimately, justice served. This is nothing compared to the next story on our list.
On Friday, Nicholas Quetz was traveling with friends down to Rocky Point when suddenly a vehicle with armed men drove by and opened fire.
October 18th, 2024. Nicholas Quetz was just trying to take a peaceful trip to Rocky Point, Mexico. He never made it. Instead, that drive through Sonora would become a flashpoint in the war between criminal gangs and American citizens. Let's talk about who Nicholas really was. Born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, Nicholas was a United States Marine Corps veteran. He deployed around the world, Australia, Southeast Asia, all over. This was a man who understood danger, but nothing in his military training could prepare him for what happened on that highway. He wasn't alone that day. Nicholas was traveling with friends, enjoying what should have been a relaxing getaway. Instead, his group encountered a cartel checkpoint, a brutal reality on many Mexican roads now. The armed men manning that checkpoint didn't care that Nicholas was a Marine. They saw an opportunity for violence. But Nicholas fought back, Eyewitnesses say he tried to drive through the checkpoint, refusing to be intimidated by cartel thugs. That's when they opened fire. Nicholas was shot in the back, through the heart, by cowards who only attack when they have overwhelming numbers. This wasn't a simple robbery gone wrong. This was a deliberate act of terror against a known American citizen. These gangsters confirmed his identity before pulling the trigger. They wanted to send a message that even U.S. military veterans weren't safe on their turf. But the message they sent wasn't what they expected. Nicholas's family, especially his father Doug, refused to stay silent. Doug called out the cartels publicly, labeling them cowards and cartel insignia. He demanded justice, not just for his son, but for all Americans targeted in Mexico. The investigation moved quickly. Mexican authorities identified suspects linked to the Sinaloa cartel's Los Chapitos faction.
I feel like my information should come from my government.
Warren Quetz is Nicholas's father. He hopes those suspects are indeed the men responsible for his son's death, but until he receives intel from our government, he isn't taking comfort in the news.
One suspect was a Honduran Presidential Guard deserter, proof that cartels now recruit trained soldiers. But justice in Mexico is complicated. Some suspects were neutralized, killed in shootouts with police. Others were arrested. But that wasn't enough for the Quetz family. They demanded U.S. involvement in the investigation. They wanted suspects extradited to face American justice. This wasn't just about Nicholas anymore. It was about all American citizens targeted by cartels. The U.S. government responded. The Treasury Department sanctioned Los Chapitos and their Mazatlan network. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem publicly honored Nicholas's sacrifice. Even President Trump's administration got involved, labeling the Sinaloa cartel a terrorist organization. But none of that brought Nicholas back. His family's grief was palpable, and their resolve unbreakable. Doug Quetz declared that the day they killed Nick would be the strongest day the cartels ever had.
My goal would be that the strongest day the cartels ever had was the day they killed Nick.
Because from that moment, the fight changed. Nicholas's murder became a rallying cry. His family started a scholarship fund in his name, turning tragedy into opportunity for others. But they never stopped demanding justice. They pushed for systemic change, not just for their son, but for all Americans. The message was clear. These gangs messed with the wrong Marine. They didn't just kill a veteran. They ignited a fire that still burns. The Quetz family turned their grief into action, refusing to let Nicholas's death be just another statistic. As intense as this story is, a more brutal case happened in faraway South Africa.
My mother was providing for the children. Now she's dead. There's no happiness or peace.
November 4th, 2013. Katsong Township, South Africa. Hundreds gathered in a dusty field, fed up with crime and feeling abandoned by the police. Their anger boiled over into deadly vigilante justice that would leave 6 men dead, including a controversial witch doctor, sparking a wave of violence across the region. These men weren't just random victims. Some belonged to the notorious Casanova gang. Others were accused of working with criminals. The first target was a 61-year-old Sangoma, a traditional healer considered by the community to be protecting gangs. He died screaming as his home burned around him, witnessed by his own family. The violence didn't stop there. The mob moved on, hunting 2 young Casanova members. They too were burned alive. Then, as the anger spread to neighboring Carltonville, 2 more suspected gang members were cornered in the street and stoned to death. It was a brutal, calculated purge. 400 men splitting up into roving groups, determined to clean their neighborhoods by any means necessary. But this wasn't just about petty crime. These communities felt trapped, caught between ruthless gangs on one side and unresponsive police on the other. For years, they'd watched crime flourish while authorities did little. Garbage piled up, services failed, and the gold mines that once powered the region closed, leaving desperation in their wake. When the mobs finally moved, local police were overwhelmed. Residents threw stones at their vehicles, driving them back.
It was just on the other side of this field that police were investigating the woman's murder. Word spread quickly, and Simon was attacked right here. The police came running over, but they were overpowered by the mob, which exacted its revenge.
The area became so volatile that authorities had to increase their presence just to keep things from spiraling further. Yet, despite the chaos, not a single arrest was made for any of the lynchings. Social media exploded with graphic images of the violence. Twitter users posted shocking photos of the victims, spreading fear and fury across South Africa. But in the townships themselves, the response was mixed. Some saw it as necessary justice. Others recognized the dangerous precedent being set. Police Minister Nathi Mathethwa condemned the actions, vowing that
the perpetrators of these crimes will feel the full force of the law.
But the reality was stark. Communities had lost faith in official justice, turning instead to brutal methods rooted in apartheid-era tactics. Community activist Nomfundo Mogapi saw the pattern clearly.
We're seeing people using very similar methods that used to be used, during apartheid, that were very brutal, without really an understanding that we're perpetuating the same brutalization of our society in trying to create a better life.
The cycle of violence threatened to consume the very communities it was supposed to protect. The aftermath was immediate and profound. Other townships erupted in similar violence. Beckersdal, already tense from weeks of riots over failed services, became a new flashpoint. The West Rand, a sprawling area west of Johannesburg, descended into chaos as gold mines closed and hope faded. Police Colonel Leonard Hlathi insisted that law enforcement was doing its job.
We have got a lot of prisons in the country, and all of these prisons are full. That tells you that the police in this country are working,
he argued. But the reality on the ground told a different story. This wasn't just about one day of violence. It was the result of years of frustration, poverty, and broken trust. Vigilante acts became common in black townships where residents felt abandoned. But this, 6 men killed in one day, was a turning point. The citizens were not having it anymore. Back in the US, a gang attempted to invade a home in California, but they learned that they had picked the wrong home. This next story will completely blow your mind.
A Los Banos neighborhood is shaken after an attempted home invasion early this morning. Police say when the homeowner realized armed robbers were inside his home, he started shooting.
March 28th, 2025, a quiet Los Banos neighborhood faced a nightmare no one saw coming. But what happened next would leave everyone talking. This isn't a story about professional security experts or trained SWAT teams. It's about an ordinary homeowner, his wife, and 3 children. Just a typical family in a seemingly safe California neighborhood. Like most, they never expected danger to come crashing through their front door. The evening began like any other. No warning signs, no suspicious activity, just the usual neighborhood calm. But behind the scenes, 5 armed men in dark clothing and masks had a plan. Their target, the family's home in the 2400 block of Edward Street. Their goal, a quick, violent invasion.
Los Banos Detective Sergeant Serena Gonzalez says 5 suspects in dark clothing and masks forcibly entered the home. She believes only 1 suspect was armed, but so was the homeowner.
When those masked intruders forced their way in, chaos erupted. Most people's instincts would be to hide or call 911. But this homeowner chose a different path. He grabbed his legally owned firearm and confronted the threat head-on. What followed wasn't just a break-in, it was a full-blown gun battle in the heart of suburbia. Bullets flew through the house as both sides exchanged fire. The homeowner's training paid off. He struck 2 of the intruders, while the remaining 3 fled through a bedroom window.
The homeowner struck 2 intruders at least once, and the other 3 fled the scene by vehicle.
Outside, the peaceful street was transformed by the sounds of gunfire that shattered the night's silence. Police and paramedics rushed to the scene. The 2 wounded suspects were quickly taken to a Modesto hospital, their condition stable, but their criminal careers on hold. The other 3 vanished into the night, leaving behind chaos and evidence. Miraculously, the homeowner, his wife, and all 3 children emerged unharmed. Their courage and quick thinking likely saved their lives. But the physical evidence, blood on the sidewalk and car, served as a stark reminder of how close the call had been. The neighborhood's sense of security was shattered. Residents like Sergio Juarez, who moved there for peace and safety, now faced a new reality. The usual talk shifted from block parties to security systems, gates, and even forming an HOA for protection.
We're talking about maybe getting some kind of security here, maybe talk to the city, putting some gates, like making like a HOA or something.
What started as a terrifying home invasion ended up uniting the community. Residents began organizing, sharing information, and working with police. The attempted robbery sparked a wave of vigilance that spread through the neighborhood. While police continued searching for the remaining suspects, the neighborhood refused to live in fear. Cameras went up, security plans were made, and everyone kept a closer eye out for anything unusual. What was meant to be a quick, violent robbery turned into a powerful lesson in community resilience. This may have been shocking, but the next story turned out deadly.
3 South LA gang members were each sentenced to decades in prison for their roles in the 2022 fatal shooting of LAPD officer Fernando Arroyo.
3 South LA gang members thought they'd found easy prey on January 10, 2022. Instead, their decision that night would cost them decades of freedom and trigger a massive response from Los Angeles law enforcement.
On January 10, 2022, the defendants robbed Arroyos as he was house shopping with his girlfriend in South Los Angeles. After robbing him, Luis Rios and Ernesto Cisneros opened fire and killed him.
The target was Fernando Arroyos, a 3-year veteran of the LAPD. That evening, Arroyos was house shopping with his girlfriend in the Florence Firestone area. Off-duty, casual, and wearing gold chains. He seemed like an ideal victim to the Florencia 13 gang members cruising the neighborhood. The attackers were Luis Alfredo de la Rosa Rios, known as Lil J or Lil Malo, Ernesto Cisneros, called Gonzo or Spooky, and Jesse Contreras, who went by Skinny Jack or Flaco. These men were career criminals, not first-timers. Earlier that day, Rios and Contreras had already robbed 2 people outside a local bar. This was their 3rd crime in a single day. That evening, the trio spotted Arroyo's gold chains. Rios handed Cisneros a loaded gun. Both men approached the couple. Cisneros targeted Arroyos while Rios confronted his girlfriend. Cisneros patted down Arroyos, taking his wallet and chains, which included his LAPD identification card. Rios simultaneously robbed Arroyos' girlfriend of her property. Suddenly, the situation escalated. After the robbery, Rios and Cisneros opened fire. Arroyos was struck once, fatally wounded. He managed to run but collapsed in an alley as the attackers fled. Area residents found Arroyos and began CPR, desperately trying to save his life. Responding officers rushed him to the hospital, but it was too late. The investigation quickly identified the Florencia 13 gang members responsible. Their brazen crime, targeting an off-duty officer, triggered a massive law enforcement response. The case moved swiftly through the federal court system due to its RICO implications. At sentencing, United States District Judge Percy Anderson made the stakes clear.
The senseless loss of life is all too frequent in our community. It is literally ripping apart the fabric of our society. The sentence imposed today must send a message, not only to this defendant, but to everyone, that if you choose to endanger our community by murdering, robbing, and trafficking in narcotics, there will be significant consequences.
Both Rios and Cisneros received 50-year federal prison sentences, while Contreras got 35 years. All 3 were ordered to pay over $90,000 in restitution to Arroyos' family, but the case sent shockwaves through both the law enforcement community and South Los Angeles neighborhoods. As United States Attorney Martin Estrada stated,
"Gangs bring death and destruction, most often upon the very communities they claim to represent. These defendants coldly and callously murdered an innocent man who grew up in our community and returned home to give back to the city he loved."
This wasn't just another statistic in LA's gang violence history. Officer Arroyos' death galvanized renewed focus on organized crime and gang activity in Los Angeles. It also highlighted the dangers law enforcement officers face, both on and off duty. The case serves as a warning. Targeting law enforcement, even off-duty, triggers consequences far beyond typical street-level violence. The swift justice delivered in federal court sent a clear message to gangs across Los Angeles. But the cost was high. A promising young officer, engaged to be married, lost his life senselessly. His family and colleagues mourned, but also resolved to continue fighting gang violence with renewed determination. The streets of South LA felt the impact. Florencia 13 lost key members to decades-long sentences. Other gangs took note. The era of light sentences for violent crimes against law enforcement was over. This case marked a turning point in LA's fight against organized street crime. But the next story on our list, also from Los Angeles, shows what happens when an ordinary citizen refuses to be intimidated by gang violence.
Attempted home invasion caught on camera, but the unsuspecting homeowner winds up pulling a gun on his attackers.
November 4th, 2023. A man in Los Angeles was just moments away from entering his home when suddenly two armed men appeared out of nowhere. What happened next would turn the tables on these intruders in a way they never expected. This was a homeowner in Mid-City, a neighborhood where rising crime had many on edge. He wasn't a public figure or someone trained for this kind of fight, just an ordinary man protecting his family. Inside the house were his wife, a 5-month-old baby, and their nanny. That night, none of them were going to become victims. The evening started like any other. The man was walking up to his front door, holding a drink in one hand and reaching for his keys with the other. Suddenly, a masked attacker jumped the gate and caught him from behind, pressing a gun to his back. The intruders demanded money, but it was clear this was more than just a robbery. His response was immediate and fearless. He whipped out his licensed concealed weapon and fired multiple shots at the retreating attackers.
Terrifying surveillance video shows a masked intruder with a gun run up to this Mid-City man about to walk in his front door. The homeowner pulls out his gun to defend himself, firing shots at the two intruders, quickly entering a shootout.
The gunfire forced the assailants to scatter. One leapt over a fence while the other jumped back over the front gate. The homeowner, who chose to remain anonymous, said,
I guess they decided to try to come at me and come in the house, but I have a 5-month-old baby and a wife, nanny in the house, and that wasn't going to happen. There was nothing in my house that was worth dying for, but I was willing to die for my family.
He made it clear there was nothing in his home worth dying for, except his family. He was willing to risk everything to keep them safe. The violent confrontation lasted only moments, but its impact was sharp and lasting. Though no arrests had been made immediately, police launched an investigation, and the community was left shaken. The man warned the intruders with no hesitation.
I think they should just pick a new career before they do end up in jail.
In the immediate aftermath, the family filed a report with the LAPD's Olympic Division. The homeowner stayed anonymous for safety, but his story spread quickly, a stark example of what happens when criminals pick the wrong target. Despite the fear that crime breeds, this man's stand was a fierce reminder. Sometimes, ordinary citizens refuse to back down. Coming up next, a town in Mexico finally decided it was enough and went up against the Knights Templar cartel.
Nuestro movimiento inicia el 24 de febrero del 2013. Cansado nuestro pueblo de vivir oprimido, de vivir secuestrado, de vivir humillado.
February 24th, 2013. The day Michoacan's farmers picked up their hunting rifles and decided they wouldn't be victims anymore. These weren't soldiers. They were lime pickers, avocado growers, shopkeepers, and pastors. Ordinary citizens pushed too far by the Knights Templar cartel's reign of terror. Their story would change how Mexico viewed civilian resistance and inspire a new era of defiance against organized crime. The Knights Templar cartel started as a drug trafficking operation, but things got much worse when they began extorting every business in Michoacan. Farmers paid protection fees just to work their land. Shopkeepers paid a quota on every tortilla sold.
Teníamos que pagarle cuota. Todos pagábamos, todos sin excepción. Ganaderos, limoneros, fábricas, comerciantes, cobros del pan, cobros de la tortilla, cobros de todas las actividades que puedan existir.
If a cartel member liked your wife, they'd take her. If they wanted your daughter, you could only pray. The violence and humiliation became unbearable. Even churches weren't safe. The Knights Templar built their own religious cult, complete with saints and sacred symbols. They controlled every aspect of life in Michoacan, preaching morality while kidnapping for ransom. In their eyes, they were the government. But Michoacan is Mexico's breadbasket. Those farmers weren't about to give up without a fight. The first resistance started in small towns like Tepalcatepec and La Ruana. Armed only with hunting rifles and farm tools, they formed makeshift checkpoints and patrols. Soon, towns all over the Tierra Caliente region joined the uprising. As the self-defense movement grew, so did government pressure. Authorities called them vigilantes. But these weren't criminals. They were desperate people forced to break the law to survive. They called themselves autodefensas, which means self-defenders. Their goal was simple: expel the Knights Templar from Michoacan. The Knights Templar responded with typical brutality. They burned power stations, leaving 500,000 people without electricity. They torched gas stations, hoping to starve the resistance into submission. Anyone suspected of supporting the auto defenses disappeared, but each attack only strengthened the movement's resolve.
Yo soy de Buenavista y fui un estudiante ahí de Apatzingán, de la escuela de enfermería. Por culpa de esas personas llamados templarios, dejé el estudio. 2 veces me detuvieron, la misma gente de Apatzingán junto con la policía municipal, sin poder entrar a Apatzingán ni a pie ni en vehículo.
As more towns joined, the auto defenses created their own radio network. They broadcasted warnings about cartel movements and coordinated community defense. When one town was attacked, others sent reinforcements. The Knights Templar found themselves facing a united front of desperate but determined citizens. But the government didn't know how to react. At first, they tried to disband the self-defense groups. Then they offered to legalize them as rural defense forces, but only if they joined the army. Most refused, knowing the cartels had infiltrated many police departments. The battle reached its peak in Apatzingán, the Knights Templar's stronghold. Federal troops joined the auto defenses for a final push. After months of gunfights, Apatzingán fell. The cartel's power was broken, at least for a while. But victory came at a cost. Many auto defenses leaders were arrested or disappeared. Some groups became corrupt themselves, forming new criminal organizations. Others maintained their original purpose, protecting their communities against new threats. Today, Michoacan is quieter, but the fight isn't over. New cartels have emerged, sometimes disguised as community police. The original auto defenses movement proved that ordinary people can challenge organized crime, but it also showed the dangers of taking justice into your own hands. The Michoacan uprising wasn't just about fighting one cartel. It was a message to every criminal organization in Mexico. Some communities will fight back, no matter the odds. The auto defenses movement changed how citizens view their power. It's a warning that sometimes the people pushed too far will become their own army. But the Knights Templar wasn't the only gang to learn a heavy lesson. Back in the US, the MS-13 gang would learn a deep lesson when they messed with the wrong citizens.
Why? Why did it happen? Why did you choose my daughter that day?
May 2016, Brentwood, Long Island. 2 teenage girls, Nisa Mickens and Kayla Cuevas, were just walking home from school when they crossed paths with one of the most brutal criminal organizations in the US. Their deaths would ignite a war against MS-13 and forever change the face of gang violence in suburban America. Brentwood, once a quiet suburb, became ground zero in the battle against MS-13. The gang, notorious for its extreme violence and recruitment of young immigrants, had been terrorizing Long Island for years. But it was the murders of Nisa and Kayla that finally pushed the community and law enforcement over the edge. For months, Brentwood families lived in fear. MS-13 members prowled the streets, recruiting teens from local schools and enforcing their rules with machetes and baseball bats. Parents warned their children to stay home after dark, but the violence kept escalating. The gang's reign of terror reached its peak with a series of brutal murders in 2016, including the deaths of Nisa, Kayla, and several others. MS-13 operated under a strict kill or be killed mentality. Any perceived disrespect, real or imagined, could mean a death sentence. The gang targeted not just rivals, but anyone who stood in their way or refused to join. Their weapon of choice, a machete, became a symbol of their cruelty and dominance. As bodies piled up, the Suffolk County Police Department partnered with the FBI's Long Island Gang Task Force. The investigation became one of the largest anti-gang operations in New York history. Undercover agents infiltrated the gang, while prosecutors built a massive racketeering case that would eventually bring down dozens of MS-13 members. On September 13, 2016, MS-13 members spotted Kayla and Nisa walking home. They recognized Kayla as a target from a previous dispute. The gang called their leaders, who authorized the hit. In a coordinated attack, they brutally murdered both girls with bats and a machete. The next morning, their battered bodies were found, sending shockwaves through the community. The murders galvanized local, state, and federal authorities. Within months, a 41-count indictment charged 13 MS-13 members with 7 murders, attempted murders, assaults, drug trafficking, and racketeering. The MS-13 leader, Alexis Sainz, also faced charges.
Prosecutors say Sainz is the leader of MS-13. Prosecutors say he's responsible for ordering and approving the killings of 8 people, 3 attempted murders, and other crimes.
The investigation uncovered an arsenal of weapons, gang paraphernalia, and evidence linking the suspects to multiple crimes. The victims' families became symbols of resistance. Elizabeth Alvarado, Nisa's mother, brought her daughter's ashes to court, vowing to speak for those silenced by gang violence.
The prosecution says most of his victims were innocent.
Evelyn Rodriguez, Kayla's mother, became a national anti-gang activist. Their courage inspired a community-wide movement against MS-13. Law enforcement launched Operation Matador, targeting MS-13 cliques across Long Island. The crackdown led to hundreds of arrests, disrupting the gang's operations and sending a clear message. Brentwood would not be intimidated. Schools implemented anti-gang programs, while community organizations provided alternatives for at-risk youth. The case drew the attention of President Trump, who visited Brentwood to highlight the administration's fight against gang violence. The national spotlight brought resources and political pressure, further strengthening the crackdown on MS-13. Despite the pressure, MS-13 leaders tried to continue their operations from prison. Investigators discovered the gang was smuggling contraband, including cell phones, drugs, and alcohol, behind bars. But these desperate tactics only strengthened the case against them. Both Alexis and Gyro Science, known as Blasty and Funny, were convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to decades in prison. Their downfall marked the beginning of the end for MS-13's dominance in Brentwood. The crackdown drastically reduced MS-13's presence on Long Island. While the fight against gang violence continues, Brentwood's stand against MS-13 became a national model for community resilience and law enforcement cooperation. If you thought this was intense, wait until you hear what happened in Tacoma, Washington back in 1989. It started with a simple neighborhood barbecue. September 23, 1989, Army Staff Sergeant Bill Folk and his neighbors gathered on Ash Street in Tacoma, Washington. Their goal: show unity and plan ways to fight back against growing drug activity and gang violence in their neighborhood. But this community gathering would soon spiral into one of the most infamous shootouts in American history. Bill Folk wasn't just another concerned citizen. As a sergeant with the Army Rangers, he knew how to plan, organize, and defend. When he bought his condemned house on Ash Street in 1987, he poured his energy into making it a home. But by 1989, that investment was threatened by drugs and gangs overrunning the street. The neighborhood just kept getting progressively worse, Falk remembered.
These guys were trying to take over the neighborhood.
Police rarely responded to calls, leaving residents feeling abandoned. The final straw came during Folk's barbecue. As neighbors enjoyed burgers and community, The house across the street, well known for drug activity, began throwing bottles and fruit at the gathering. Folk and his fellow rangers confronted them, but instead of backing down, the group threatened to burn down Folk's home and shoot him. By 6:30 p.m., a warning shot rang out from a passing car. Realizing trouble was coming, Folk made a call to his army base.
Hey, this is Sergeant Folk. I'm at home. I'm about to come under attack and I need every available ranger at my house now.
Around 15 Army Rangers arrived, joining the neighbors who refused to flee. They prepared defenses as night fell. At 9:20 p.m., chaos erupted. Gunfire from multiple directions hammered Folk's house, sounding like a military range during live fire.
It was like being on a military firing range when somebody says, "Commence fire." Just all of a sudden, pow, 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 gunfire from every direction. You could hear bullets hitting the house.
Folk recalled. Over 300 rounds were fired in total. Despite the volume of fire, Folk instructed his defenders to avoid hitting anyone if possible, worried about legal consequences. Still, according to Folk, some attackers were wounded, but quickly removed by their associates before police arrived. The Rangers and neighbors held their ground until police finally responded. The aftermath was confusing and tense. 2 alleged gang members were arrested, but no charges were filed against Folk or his defenders. The police and Army command both criticized Folk for not calling police before the shooting began, but ultimately supported the community's right to self-defense. Folk remembers being told,
"We were told by the police and others that we were legally right in what we did. We defended ourselves from a heinous crime, and there's nothing wrong with the way it went down."
The shootout triggered massive changes in Tacoma policing. The department shifted from only responding to crimes personally witnessed to adopting community-oriented policing. More officers were assigned to Hilltop, drug houses were targeted, and neighborhood block groups multiplied. Crime on Ash Street plummeted. 30 years later, Folk still lives in that same house. One bullet hole remains as a reminder of that night. The incident served as a wake-up call for Tacoma, showing what can happen when citizens feel abandoned by law enforcement. It marked a turning point in American urban policing. But if you think that neighborhood defense was wild, wait until you hear another heroic story of a homeowner defending his family from a violent gang attack. March 2022. A Selby family's quiet evening shattered as 6 masked men kicked in their door. Crowbars swung through the air. Violence erupted in every corner of their home. The targets, an ordinary couple caring for 2 small children. The attackers, a gang of 6, armed, masked, and ruthless. Their plan was simple: overwhelm, terrorize, get rich quick. But this was no ordinary home invasion. The homeowner fought back. In the chaos, he grabbed a kitchen knife, stabbing one attacker as the others beat him with crowbars. Suddenly, the gang's brutal advantage disappeared. The wounded man collapsed. His fellow intruders panicked, bolting for their getaway car. But the homeowner didn't run. Instead, he tended to the wounded attacker and called 999, pleading for paramedics and police. Emergency crews arrived within minutes, but it was too late. The stabbed intruder died at the scene. His 5 accomplices were gone, fleeing into the night. What followed was a textbook police investigation. Detectives from Selby's major investigation team launched a massive manhunt. They gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and tracked every lead, determined to catch the attackers before they disappeared for good. Within 48 hours, all 5 surviving gang members were in custody. Their names: Alan James Hall, Daniel Welford, Max Jackson, Callan Hunt, and Andrew Richardson. Each tried to deny involvement, offering lame excuses and no comment answers, but the evidence was overwhelming. Forensic teams found DNA, fingerprints, and blood matching the attackers. Surveillance cameras placed them together before, during, and after the crime. Phone records showed coordinated communication. Witnesses placed them at the scene. The case was airtight. Faced with this mountain of evidence, Hall and Richardson pleaded guilty on the first day of trial. The other 3, Welford, Jackson, and Hunt, tried their luck with a jury. It didn't work. All 5 were convicted of aggravated burglary. The sentences were severe. Jackson and Welford each received 13 years. Richardson and Hall got slightly reduced terms, 11 years, 4 months each, for their guilty pleas. Hunt, deemed a dangerous offender, was hit hardest, 19 years plus 5 years extended license. Detective Sergeant John Kenworthy called it a premeditated, violent, and distressing attack. He praised the first responders who tried to save the dying intruder, even as they secured the crime scene.
Violent acts of this nature are rare in North Yorkshire,
Kenworthy said,
but we will work relentlessly to bring offenders to justice.
The homeowner faced no charges. Police determined he acted purely in self-defense, to protect his family from armed invaders. His quick thinking and courage likely saved lives that night. But the impact lingers. The traumatized family will never forget the violence that shattered their home. The attackers now face decades behind bars, reflecting on their poor decision-making from a prison cell.